Hi, my name is Neely. I am an expressive arts therapist, and I'm going to be talking about the Italian painter from the High Renaissance, Raphael. He died on April 6, 1520, which makes it now 500 years ago. And I'm going to be talking about his style, about his work, and I'm going to divide it into three sections. The first one would be religious scenes. The second one would be mythological scenes. And the third one would be portraits. Let's begin. So this is Raphael's self-portrait, just to give you an idea of how the man we're talking about looked. And we will discuss a little bit more about this specific self-portrait in the section related to portraits later on. The Wedding of the Virgin from 1504. This is a sophisticated altarpiece which is done by oil on round-headed panel. It's quite large, 69 by 48, and it's in the Pinacoteca di Brera in Milan. Initially commissioned as 3 pieces to be done by Raphael's teacher, the last piece was done by Raphael due to the absence of his teacher. But Raphael also did a similar work on his own with the same title, which was commissioned for a church, and this is the one that we're looking at. It was moved many times through different locations over the time, and it caused damage to it. This is an excellent example of Raphael's mastery of composition and problem solving. The given shape of an altarpiece to which he had to insert his composition while keeping the golden rules of symmetry and perspective was not an easy task for sure. The holy union in marriage of the couple is the center of the painting, creating a nice balance which is echoed in the background by the shape of the temple and culminating at the top of the cupola, which is a circular dome-like structure on top of the building. The Madonna of the Meadow, also known as the Madonna del Prato, is from 1505 to 1506. It's on oil on board, and it's currently in the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna. The dimensions are 44 by 35 inches. Formally, it depicts the Madonna with the Christ child and St. John the Baptist. Raphael painted it when he was about 20 years old, after he has arrived in Florence. The Virgin is looking at the 2 infants, Jesus and John the Baptist. They are arranged in such a way that a triangle composition is created, and it is enhanced by their gaze. It is a very peaceful and symmetrical work, pleasant to look at. In the background, the view is also delicate in a light blue tone. There is something playful in the manner Jesus is grabbing the cross from John the Baptist. And perhaps it is a reference to what will become of Jesus. This harmony in the composition made other patrons, such as the Pope, to commission future paintings from Raphael. Madonna of the Pinks, oil on fruit wood from around 1506 to 1507, currently in the National Gallery in London, dimensions 11 by 8. I'm not sure why it is called Madonna of the Pinks. What is the pink here? Perhaps the flowers that the Madonna is holding in her hands and giving them to the child? Something to think about. This is an early devotional painting attributed to Raphael. The painting depicts a young Virgin Mary with a Christ child, handing him carnations. These flowers are symbolical. They represent, according to a Christian legend, the time when the Virgin wept at the crucifixion. This is typical to the time. Artists used objects that had a mythological or religious meaning, such as flowers or animals, and the viewers knew what they meant. The relaxed domestic setting is influenced by similar paintings of Dutch artists. Another symbolic piece is the ruined building seen through the window. It is talking about the ruin of the pagan world and the emergence of Christianity. If we had not known the title of the painting, we might have thought that it is just a regular scene of a mother and her baby playing together in a very domestic and peaceful scene at home. The Holy Family of Francis I, 1518, oil on canvas transferred from wood. It is currently in the Louvre in Paris. The dimensions are 81 on 55. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Saint Elizabeth, John the Baptist as an infant, and two angels are depicted in this painting. It is believed that most of the work on this painting was done by Raphael's assistants, and he only put his name on it. It was commissioned as a gift to the wife of Francis I, and that's why it's called the Holy Family of Francis I. It looks like a domestic scene where the women are busy with the children and the man is not part of it. He's just watching as a bystander. The tones are very warm. Raphael is showing here his talent in creating beautiful textures, almost coming to life, especially in the garments. Even though the background is dark, the Madonna and the baby are highlighted, thus becoming the focal point of this painting. Now, had we not known that this is a religious scene of the Virgin and Joseph and Jesus, it might have looked like a regular scene of a family with the hustle and bustle of everyone very close to each other, engaged in this scene. But of course, we do see the halos, and that tells us that this is a religious scene. The Miraculous Draught of Fishes from 1515. It's one of 7 cartoons of tapestry, and it's in Victoria and Albert Museum. The size of it is quite large, 3 yards by 5 yards. It is one of the 7 remaining Raphael cartoons for tapestries for the Sistine Chapel. It is known that there was a rivalry between Michelangelo and Raphael. So these tapestries rivaled the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo in the Vatican because they were placed close by. And Michelangelo disliked Raphael and probably wasn't very happy about this. So this is a preparation, a sketch for how to produce the tapestry. And what is it about? The story is based on Luke 5, 1 to 11. The apostles were fishing unsuccessfully in the Sea of Galilee, and when Jesus told them to try one more cast, a cast is a draught of the net, and that's when they succeeded. If we look at the background, there's a lot of buildings and people and mountains which are really close by the Sea of Galilee, although in reality this is not how it looked. The Sea of Galilee does not have any mountains coming down to its shore. But this is how Raphael saw it in his mind. And it's interesting to look at the composition of how Christ is actually on the left-hand side, cropped, even though he is the most important person in the painting. So the apostles are sort of begging the one who is close to him with his hands in this motion of begging, and the other one who is not understanding what's happening, and they're all looking down to the water at the net, which is empty. So Christ is sort of motioning with his left hand, telling them probably to relax and to try one more time. And for sure, it is going to succeed. Il spasimo, which means in Italian, die in agony. This painting was done between 1514 to about 1516. It's oil on panel. It's currently in the Museo del Prado in Madrid. Dimensions are quite large, 125 on 90 inches. This is a common subject of Christ carrying the cross, and it's a very emotional one. When Jesus fell from the cross, and we can see him in the foreground of the painting, and his mother is holding her arms and hands toward him. She is also falling to her knees, and this large group of women on her right-hand side, they're all holding her while she's in agony. And that is, referring to the title of this painting. There's a lot of commotion, a lot of emotion, all these groups of people around Christ who is on the ground, but they are all on the left-hand side. The men, they are holding the cross in the back. They're standing, and the guards around them. And then in the background, we see all these groups of people. So there's a lot of action going on in this painting. And even though it is very engaging, one can still see the composition of the triangle, which is based on the cross on top of the head of Christ. That is like the focal point of the painting. And that's something to look at and think how Raphael was able to, on one hand, create such a composition which is like his usual compositions, but on the other hand, there's a lot of action, a lot of commotion, a lot of emotion in this scene, which is not still like other scenes that we have seen in previous paintings. Deposition of Christ, 1507. Drawing from Roman sarcophagi, this is an oil on wood painting, which is in the Galleria Borghese in Rome. Dimensions are 72 by 69. It is a part of a larger altarpiece, and the subject is a very common one, a very emotional one, showing the sorrow, the anger in the eyes of the participants in this scene when Christ is taken off the cross. It is divided into several groups. The main one, where we see the men holding Christ, and the side one on the right-hand side, where Mary is seen in a swoon, assisted by her ladies, the three Marys. It is interesting to look at the colors of the painting. They are cleverly balanced between the basic red, green, and blue, and in contrast with the color of the body of Christ, which is, the color of his flesh, which is sort of illuminated. Also, in terms of the composition, it is interesting to note that it looks like an inverted triangle, where Christ is the center of it. And if we look closely at the background, one can see the poles in the far distance on the right-hand side where the crucifixions occurred. Transfiguration, 1520. Tempera on wood. It's in the Pinacoteca Vaticana in Rome, and it's quite a large painting, 159 on 109, and it was unfinished at the time of Raphael's death. He actually viewed this one as his triumph, and it is talking about a religious scene where we see Christ in the center at the top, sort of in the sky, in the clouds, in a white cloth, sort of a garment, looking like a flying angel in the sky. And that's, in terms of the composition, the center, the highlight. And Raphael is using, in a clever way, the color scheme to interpret the happening in this painting, where the bottom is used with very dark colors and the top of the painting is using very light colors, heavenly colors, which give the celestial and religious meaning to the subject of the painting. This is a view of the Chigi Chapel, or how it's called in Italian, Palazzo Chigi. The architects are Bernini and Raphael, And in fact, it's the only religious building of Raphael that was preserved in its original form. You can see that there is a tremendous amount of beautiful, wonderful artifacts, and the entire wall is covered with sculptures and paintings and frescoes and whatnot. Really an amazing trove of art from the Baroque and the Renaissance. St. George and the Dragon, a painting in which no medium is mentioned. It's from 1503. The dimensions are 11 by 10, and it's currently in the Louvre in Paris. It's quite a small piece. This is about a famous medieval story. The legend of St. George and the Dragon tells of a saint who died in 303, taming and slaying a dragon that demanded human sacrifices. He did so in order to rescue a princess who would have been the next offering. Again, we can see how Raphael masters the composition in a clever way. It is still the classical triangle, where the center is the knight on the horse, but a dynamic movement is created through the use of the black-colored dragon and the white horse, and the contrast between them, and also through the instability of the horse standing on its hind legs. In the far side of the background, on the right, we can see the princess in a movement of flight. Saint Catherine of Alexandria, 1507, oil on wood. It's currently in the National Gallery in London. Dimensions are 28 by 21. Raphael used typical Renaissance pigments such as natural blue, red, and green in this painting. And it really gives us a very unique sort of color. If we compare it to some previous paintings that we've seen, the colors here are really very strong and very nice. And there's a lot of detail. If we look around the main character, we see all these beautiful flowers which show a deep knowledge of botany. Saint Catherine is looking upward in sort of an ecstasy toward the left-hand side of the painting. She's leaning on a wheel, which is related to her martyrdom. Even though the subject is of a religious nature, the depiction of Catherine is more natural and human, probably as an influence by Leonardo da Vinci. The Parnassus, 1509 to 1511. This is a fresco which resides in the Stanza della Segnatura in the Vatican in Rome, and its dimension is the size is 260 inches, quite a large fresco. It was commissioned by the Pope, and it's in a room which shows 4 areas of the human knowledge: philosophy, religion, poetry, and law. Mount Parnassus is where Apollo lived, and he is in the center playing a musical instrument. And around him, all these groups of poets and muses and holy people from the mythological era, all under this arch with decoration of meander, which is a typical Greek, ancient Greek decoration. The School of Athens, 1509 to 1511. A fresco in the Vatican in Rome. Dimensions 200 over 300 inches. What is a fresco? This is a technique of mural painting on fresh wet plaster. Once it's settled, it dries as an integral part of the wall. Fresco in Italian means fresh, so fresh paint. And what we see in this painting are the philosophers from the antiquity, such as Plato and Aristotle in the center, Socrates, and some other prominent figures of philosophers. And the idea behind the painting is to actually show the collection of knowledge, a collective of knowledge, and using the arch as the main part of the composition. Underneath are two sort of layers of people congregating in small groups of study, interacting with one another and enhancing their studies. So this is the stanza della segnatura, and this is a view of the room. This is actually the room that was the first one that Raphael decorated. And we can see on the two walls the paintings that we've seen earlier, the School of Athens and the Parnassus, as the theme of this room is a combination of wisdom and religion. A red chalk study for the Villa Farnesina. The subject is or are the three graces. It was done around 1518, and it's called red chalk because this is a color which resembles the color of blood and has been quite popular for drawing for a long time. It gives volume to the drawing, and that's why artists liked using it. The subject is derived from the Greek mythology, where three goddesses are depicted. They represent charm, beauty, and creativity. And it's a very common subject in art history. This group of women, naked women, is interesting because of the composition, which is a little bit unusual. They're all grouped together quite closely, creating a sort of a circle, but then the one on the left is reaching out with her arm to an object, thus creating a balance which is compromised, and that makes it more interesting to look at. Lucretia, engraved by Raimondi after a drawing by Raphael. It was done in 1511 to 1512, and it's now in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. The story behind this engraving is that after being raped by the royal prince, Lucretia was unable to live with the memory and the shame of what happened to her, and she stabbed herself to death. So we see her in this painting, in this engraving, holding in her right hand a sharp object, some sort of a dagger, before she's going to stab herself. There's agony on her face, and there's an imbalance in the way that she's standing, holding her left arm into the air and standing with her right leg on top of this step. So a very dynamic engraving, and of course, since it's an engraving, there's only two colors, just black and white, and even though it has no color, so to speak, we can see the action, the emotion, the sorrow. Triumph of Galatea, 1512, from Chigi's Villa. Galatea was a character from the Greek mythology. She was an immortal sea nymph, and this is about a love story between her and a mortal man. And in this fresco, we see a depiction of Galatea, who transferred her lover into an immortal river spirit so that they could be together for eternity. That is why we see the water depiction and the shells, the seashells, and the composition which is taking place in the water. This is the self-portrait of Raphael, which was done in 1506. Around he started working on it on 1504 until 1506. It is tempera on panel, and it is depicting him at the age of approximately 23. It's currently in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. The size of it is 18 by 12. Raphael is believed to have died at the age of 37 due to exhaustion related to his romantic interests. In this portrait, from the early years of his career, Raphael is using the typical triangle composition of the Renaissance, where the top of his hat is the center. He is sort of playing with a contrast between the light area of his face and the dark area on the right-hand side of the painting. In fact, if you look closer, you will see that in the dark area, Raphael's shadow is making it even darker. The use of this contrast is what's making this painting more interesting. This is Guidobaldo da Montefeltro, and this portrait is from around 1507, and it was done a year before the end of his reign. He was the Duke of Urbino for a very long time, from 1482 to 1508. His spouse is Elisabetta Gonzaga, and we'll talk about her in the next slide. They had no children, so he adopted as his heir his sister's child and nephew of the Pope. During his reign, the court of Urbino was considered one of the most refined and elegant in Italy. On a personal note, he suffered from gout, which is the cause of his death. It is interesting to look at the composition of this painting. The subject is facing the viewer in a frontal position, portraying power, authority, and strength. There is some interesting tension in the background, which is created by the division behind the subject. On the left-hand side, there is a blank area, sort of brownish area. But on the right-hand side, there is a view of the city, as if we're looking out from a window. Elisabetta Gonzaga. This portrait is from around 1504 to 1505. It's oil on wood, and it is today in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Dimensions are 20 by 14 inches. This is a female portrait, and it depicts the wife of the Duke Guibaldo II of Urbino. She was interested in literature and art. She's wearing a traditional long braided hairdo. On her forehead, she has an ornamental headdress signifying she is part of the sovereign family. It is interesting that it is in the shape of a scorpion, an unpleasant insect. But if one looks at her facial expression, she does not seem to be a very pleasant person either. And perhaps that's the symbol of, probably it's the symbol of the Urbino family. Her positioning is frontal in an intimidating sort of a way, and her patchwork black and gold dress is the ultimate sign of power. Looking at the background of the picture, one cannot deny its similarity to Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, with the eerie mountains and trees. This is the portrait of Pope Julius II. It was done between 1511 to 1512. It is oil on wood, and it is currently believed to be in London. The dimensions are 43 by 31 inches. It was unusual for its time and would be a big influence on how popes were portrayed in the future. This portrait was hung in a church in Rome on feast and high holidays. It was said that it was so similar to how the Pope really looked that people were frightened of it. It was very realistic. The original is believed to be in the National Gallery in London. Now again, the Pope is not looking at the viewer, as we have also seen in the previous paintings. It seems he is reflecting upon something, perhaps some holy thoughts. If we compare this painting to the others, the background, although in one green tone, looks like drapes with a papal insignia decorations. It makes it more interesting and decorative. One can almost touch and feel the various textures of the garments, such as the red velvet or the white silk. This is the portrait of Bindo Altoviti. It was finished around 1515. It was started in 1512, and it took about 3 years to finish. It's oil on wood. It is now in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. in the United States, and its dimensions are 24 by 17 inches. Bindo Altoviti was a rich banker in Rome who liked the arts. This painting was done when he was around the age of 24. This is not a typical portrayal of men. He seems to be portrayed in a feminine way, using a delicate skin tone, sensual red lips, and long hair, revealing his back in a unique way. The side whisker is a pointer to the fact that it is a portrayal of a male figure, and of course his clothing with a typical Renaissance hat. This sort of game around the gender identity of the portrayed subject is seen by some art historians as the influence Leonardo da Vinci had on Raphael. Portrait of Baldassare Castiglione. It is attributed to Raphael, so we're not sure if it's actually Raphael who did this painting. It's from 1514 to 1515, all on canvas. It's in the Louvre in Paris, and the dimensions are 32 by 26 inches. Baldassare Castiglione was considered a great example of a Renaissance portrait, as it depicts Raphael's friend, who was a diplomat and an author of a book about the court of Urbino. By 1504, they were close friends, and their advancement in society was parallel. It is one of the only two paintings which were done on canvas. The rest are on wood. Now let's have a look at him. He is wearing a doublet, which is a typical jacket worn by men in the Renaissance. There's a fur trim and an elaborate turban. His clothing suggests that he is from a high socioeconomic level, and it must have been done during winter, using this fur on top of his head and around his shoulders. There is something soft, humane in his facial expression, which stands in contrast to his elevated status in society. Many artists were influenced by this portrait. La Fornarina, which is in Italian, the daughter of the baker. This is a portrait of Raphael's mistress. It was done in 1518 to 1519. It is oil on wood, and it's in Rome. The dimensions are 33 by 24 inches. During the last 3 years of his life, Raphael had a mistress, and he lived in Rome. He never married, although he was engaged in 1514. It is believed that he had many love affairs, but a permanent one was with Margherita Luti, also known as La Fornarina, who is depicted in this portrait. She was his model, but other than that, there is no information about her. It is a beautiful young woman who is depicted seated, with her upper body naked, in a voluptuous pose. Her gaze is toward her left, probably at Raphael, who is painting her, and it has an inviting smile. The manner in which she is holding a transparent piece of garment on her body enhances the sensuality of the setting, as her belly is covered yet visible. On her left arm, she is wearing a bracelet with Raphael's name on it, implying maybe on their relationship. Her hair cover is typical of the period. It is in contrast with her almost white, naked body. The fact that she's holding the garment under her left breast adds to the sensuality of this scene. Thank you so much for watching my art lecture about Raphael. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you've learned a lot, and I can't wait to see you on my next art presentation. In the meantime, I invite you to follow me on my account at ARTiosity on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye-bye now.